distinguished participants, organizers, colleagues, and friends, Assalamu alaikum. I join you in the spirit of solidarity, sisterhood, and the empowerment of women worldwide. As I stand before you today, I am reminded of the inspiring views of Wajiha Al-Huwaidar, a courageous women's rights activist and the Rosa Parks of feminist activism in Saudi Arabia. She said that any natural distribution of any kind of creatures on earth always include a 5% of pathfinders or pioneers who can push the interest of their cohort forward. She believes that these pathfinders have two vital functions. First, to reproduce or increase the species to which they belong, and second, to lead in confronting the challenges that are faced by the species they represent. To me, this Congress is what Wajiha is talking about. It is about bringing together the pathfinders of women's leadership who have the capability to move the interest of our sisters worldwide. And these pathfinders are here to perform the two vital functions of reproducing the number of female leaders all over the world and utilizing the army of women leaders to strategically win the battle for gender equality in all dimensions of human life. Women world leaders like you face innumerable challenges that stem from patriarchy, including male-oriented institutions and work culture that undermine feminist visions. You all have to confront the phenomenon of excessive visibility, which elicits unreasonable expectations that make leadership onerous for women. For example, you are expected to look strong yet gorgeous, feisty yet feminine, and brilliant yet gracious, enough to shroud the idiocy of many male colleagues. There is a constant expectation for women leaders to prove that they are better leaders than men. And often their private life is used as an extra yardstick to gauge their success as corporate and institutional leaders. Unfortunately, to succeed as women leaders of the world, these are not the only challenges that we need to face. First, we have a globalized world of over 7 billion people, exponentially growing at approximately 1.14% per year, or 200,000 people a day, with more than 50% of such people living in less than $2.50 per day. The good news is we may never run out of human resources. The bad news is the quality of human resource is fast deteriorating due to poverty and inability to get education for the growing majority. The number of mouths to feed also increases disproportionately with the capacity of nature to produce food. The context of world women's leadership is one that propels humanity into a brink of disaster. Second, there is very little indication that a shared understanding of globalization exists among world leaders. The dynamic flow of capital from one continent to another and their impacts on economies, the web of cultural string that connects, entangle and divide human assets, the strains of political agenda and diminishing power of states to regulate and set boundaries to physical and intellectual adventures of its people, and the ever-advancing state of technology and their influence on collective choices and arbitrary exclusion of those who cannot access them. These are but a few aspects of globalization that we need to understand and deal with if we want to become compelling as world leaders. Third, transformations created by globalization affect everybody, but the worst effects are experienced by those who are kept in the margins of the vortex. For example, more than half of the world's population does not have control over global forces that reinforce their poverty, and those who have no access to information media are excluded from a new cultural order that emerges across borders. This is relevant to women leaders because majority of people who are marginalized by the globalization are females, and the adverse consequences of exclusion lies squarely in their shoulders. I congratulate the organizers of this Congress for the well thought out agenda of our two-day gathering. The first panel recognizes the wealth of insights that have been bequeathed to us by early women leaders, the wisdom of Eleanor Roosevelt, under whose intellectual and charismatic leadership the UN Declaration of Human Rights was developed and adopted, the indomitable feminine mettle of Aung San Suu Kyi of Burma and Corazon Aquino of the Philippines, who stood up against despotism without resorting to violence. The audacity of Billie Jean King, who fought and defeated the King of Tennis in a spectacular, high-profile match to prove to the world that a female tennis player's capacity is not only equal, but could even be superior to that of a man, and many, many more. Their leadership left behind strategies that are peaceful, inclusive, and life-changing. But the present challenges demand that we learn also from contemporary experiences and unconventional perspectives. As producers of knowledge on women's leadership, we should chronicle, process, and use women leaders' experiences and perspectives as tools in working with fellow leaders of the world. The second and third panel discussions are opportunities for us to define the changes that we want to make in the corporate world, within state and academic institutions, in the development world, in communities, and at home. I believe that world leadership requires connecting formal macro interventions with micro interventions at home. Leadership of women should begin at home by training girls to claim and practice the right to decision-making, and by raising boys who respect and believe in the female's power to lead and effect positive change. But it should also begin in the highest levels of policy and decision-making, which I believe is what we will do in this Congress. The power to change the world is in our hands, but we need to be strategic, especially in the choice of frontiers in which to wage our collective influence. As you all know, it has been 19 years since the Fourth World Conference on Women was held in Beijing. Since 2001, there has been a call from women activists worldwide for United Nations to convene the Fifth World Conference on Women next year. In 2012, the UNGA President and UN Secretary General had formally proposed the convening of this conference in 2015. However, up to the present, no common decision has yet been made by member states. From what I know, instead of holding the Fifth World Conference on Women, the UN Commission on the Status of Women will carry out next year a review and appraisal of the implementation of the Beijing Platform for Action. Because of this, UN member states are now supposed to be undertaking a country-level review to produce a country report that will input into the UN CSW review of 2015. This is good, but it is not a substitute to the holding of the Fifth World Conference on Women. We should use the country-level assessment processes to push our advocacy for the holding of the Fifth World Conference on Women. And how? The question is how. First, the UN CSW issued guidelines containing the required format and content of the country report of member states. Section 4 of this format asks member states to identify the priorities and recommendations for strengthening gender equality and the empowerment of women through the future Sustainable Development Goals and the post-2015 Development Agenda. As women leaders, we need to intervene in the country-level assessments and insert the recommendation for the holding the Fifth World Conference on Women in 2015. Second, we could lobby individually and collectively with female heads of states or with presidents of countries like Canada, Denmark, Norway, and some Nordic countries to push this agenda to holding the 5th World Conference on Women in 2015. Both at the UNCSW and in the General Assembly, they can send letters or deliver statements to the UNCSW or direct their respective UN missions to do the same. Sisters, these are only a few of the strategic actions that we can do. The post-2015 development agenda is already being framed, and we cannot afford to miss this process. We need to define a high-level shared priority that should be included in this future long-term development agenda of the world, which will replace the Millennium Development Goals. In closing, let me thank and congratulate the organizers of this Congress for coming up with such a meaningful agenda. To the participants, let me say that I deeply honor your courage and strength as women and as world leaders. It takes remarkable commitment, wisdom, and hard work to be like you. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Amazing. Coming from a country which has so much of adversities in the way, but you make adversity your ally and life transforms. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause once again for Jalal.